Today, the tools you're going to need are 14, 17, 19, and 21 millimeter wrenches, and I would also get the accompanying sockets with that. I just have impact sockets because you're going to see in the video I do use an impact gun. That just, you don't need that, it's not a necessity, but I do recommend it just because it makes everything go a little bit easier. It's easier to just work with it. Impact gun. The other big thing I definitely would have, this hammer comes in handy when coupling the brake line. You're going to most likely need this for the arm, and you'll see that in the video. You don't see me particularly using this in the video because the camera does die at one point. I definitely recommend any anti-seize lubricant. I just have the aluminum type, there's a copper, it doesn't matter, either way. Anything that'll help with screws. I would not do this job without some type of lubricant. And that is, you could use this stuff, the deep creep. You could use, what's that, PB Blast is a good one. And there's all kinds of others you can use. I would 100% do this job with that. Most likely need any type of socket wrench or anything, especially to take your wheel off or anything like that, or impact gun. I would also recommend any pry bar. Pry bars will help you in this when mounting the strut back up and moving your main wheel assembly and everything back into place. Other tools I did use in this, and you don't have to have it, but I do recommend, you might want a torque wrench when you're putting your wheel back on. Nissan Altimas will do about 100 foot-pounds. Like I said, I'll be using this 3/8 impact. This thing worked really handy, and you can use an air impact, it doesn't matter. This is just kind of what I have laying around. I do break this 4-inch grinder out, and you'll see why. Hopefully you won't need it, and you can even use like even a small aerosol instead of this. This is just what I had laying around, and it worked. Depending on the part, the manufacturer who makes your part for the strut, a couple bolts may be different on a new strut, so when you're putting it on, for the 3 top bolts of the strut that mount to the top of the frame of the car, it was a 15 millimeter, and the old one was a 14. So I would just keep your eyes out when you're putting it back together. Make sure you're using the right size, because every manufacturer, maybe the off-brand, if you're buying the off-brand, may make a different one with different bolts. And that should be all you need for this project. And so let's get started. Also forgot, you also want to jack stand and jack your car up. Okay, now you can go. Now you're ready. Alright, so when you're taking the wheel off, make sure you have your wheel lock. I'm not sure wherever you'd keep that, but let's get going and take the wheel off. Alright, so after you have the wheel off, I would go over all the bolts with some of this, well, with any lubricant, anything that'll kind of loosen up the bolts, because most of the time these bolts are going to be pretty well on there. So I just give everything a nice dosing, and then just let her sit for a few minutes, and then we can start cranking away at taking this thing apart. Alright, so your next step is to take these 2 bolts out here. This one's going to be 17 millimeter, and this one will be 19 millimeter. Alright, so also while you're down in here taking these out, right behind it is a small clip that holds your brake line in. You're going to want to remove this clip, and don't throw this clip out, just keep it all attached, because you'll need this for when you put the new assembly back in. Be very careful when you're doing this, because this brake line is it's only a piece of rubber. So you don't want to start pounding up here and try and slip. So you want to just make sure you're on a spot that's good and sturdy when you're hitting it with the hammer. For this bolt that connects to this arm here, you're going to want to use 17 millimeter here, and on the back side, just like on the bolts below, it'll be a 19 on the back. This one, it can be a little bit of a pain because you can't really see what you're doing. So be very careful with this and make sure your wrench is on there correctly, or you can strip the bolt on the back side. All right, so next step, you're going to want to take these 3 top bolts off. When you're doing one of these struts, you might as well replace one of these arm bars here, because these are normally shot too by the time you get to it. This one is pretty well done for. So the next step in taking these arm bars apart, you're going to want to take your 19-17 millimeter wrench and start taking the bottom bolt off. When you're taking it off, make sure you're watching the brake line. You don't want to break the brake line. So taking off the bottom piece, what we had to do, as you can see in the video, there was no way we were getting it off with the wrench, so I took a 4-inch grinder and cut it off at that point, and this gave us enough room to break this free with the rust. So what we did was we just got a large 1/2-inch wrench so we can get enough oomph to take it off, to break this bolt free, and then we could get back behind there and finally get this off. And you might not need all that. This one was just particularly rusty and pretty well on there. All right, so next, you'll want to get your new piece and slide it on in. Well, if you're not a ding-dong, put it in the wrong way. So when you're putting this on, I'd get a little anti-seize lube and put on each bolt in case you'd ever have to take this apart again soon, because this area of the car is exposed to a lot of water. This will help you a little bit for next time you take it off. So next, all you gotta do is tighten the bolt here, and then take your strut and put it back in and tighten the top bolt, and then you're pretty much done. So I didn't realize the battery had died when I was putting it together. You have these 2 bolts back into place. You want to tighten these fairly good. See, as you can see, we used some of that lubricant. We got this clip back in place. You want to reuse the clip off of this. Let's get a closer look. There's a little metal clip in here, and then you want to make sure all 3 of these line up right. These are all good in and tight. Just put the whole wheel on how you normally do. Just put 1 or 2 lug nuts in and then lower the car. Then what you're going to want to do is step back and look at the wheel. Make sure it's sitting straight up and down, so that just means your alignment is right. If it's crooked, off to the side, left or right, up and down, that means your alignment's off. So what you're gonna have to do with that is loosen these up, and then you're gonna wanna take this and just pry it back and forth, the whole assembly here of your axle, until your wheel sits straight. Because if you don't do that and your alignment's off, your tires will wear uneven, and then you'll go through tires a lot faster that way.